Hello. Yeah. So, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and welcome to you all. You all are the ones who make Kerala Literature Festival such an exciting event. This time we had people from 18 countries, including me because I was coming in from Norway. Um, just wanted to say a couple of things, but first and foremost, a big welcome to Jasmine Shah. He is many, many things, as you will discover. But first and foremost, he is a policy expert. But then he gave up his career to implement these development policies. It's one thing to have it as theories, but it's another thing to actually make them work at the grassroots to help citizens of the country. So he decided to join the AAP government. The reason he decided to join that was because this was the government, this was the party where his viewpoints aligned with the ruling party. So he then decided that he is going to implement these policies in a fertile ground like Delhi. And therefore, he came out with his book, which is called Delhi Model. Now, this is not a Netflix show about, fashionable girls, models walking up and down the catwalk and then getting murdered or something, as Netflix shows are about. But this book is actually much more dramatic because it shows how governance can really work in India and transform people's lives. So now the thing is, AAP as an Aam Aadmi Party, does not get much publicity. But when it gets publicity, whatever publicity it gets is usually negative. So that's when Jasmine decided that he would write and document the work that AAP has done in Delhi. And this book has come out very recently, Delhi Model by Jasmine, and this is going to be the Kerala launch of the book. So I request Jasmine. Congratulations. So tell us about, most people have not read the book naturally. This is the launch today. Tell us a bit about the Delhi model.
Thank you so much, Anita, for such a kind introduction. And I have been to Kerala many times, but this is my first time in Kozhikode. And I must say that I regret I was not here earlier. I mean, it's such a beautiful place. I really am thankful to KLF, to the entire team here for organizing such a beautiful festival. Thanks, first of all, to all of you who are here to hear us talk about the Delhi model. I want to say some of my people are also here. My wife Padma Priya is joining me here. Riaz Komu is a dear friend. Anjali, all of them, Director Anjali Menon, she's also here. So thank you so much, first of all, for being here to hear about the Delhi model. As you said, what is this about? Right? For many of you in Kerala, when Aam Aadmi Party, the reason why I chose to write this book, the first reason was, the story of Aam Aadmi Party is a very peculiar one. And even though it's a very small size, I always feel that it's, one of those tiny boxers who punches above its weights, that it's a small party really. I mean, it is a national party. But when the Aam Aadmi Party was formed after a historic India Against Corruption movement, and especially when it came to power in 2015, winning an unprecedented mandate in Indian history. No political party has won by 96% of seats. We won 67 out of 70 assembly seats in 2015. At that time, I really believe the entire country and I believe Indians around the world were watching. They never imagined that a political party built out of people like us, people like educated middle class Indians who care about the country had any business being in politics. But here was a party of activists, ex-IRS officers, journalists, a Rhodes Scholar who's now the Chief Minister of Delhi. These people somehow found it within themselves to form a political party. And not just that, they actually managed to beat everybody else in a very handsome manner. So imagine, and I know a lot of people, even in Kerala, Aam Aadmi Party is right now not there in the assembly, but a lot of people in Kerala follow the Aam Aadmi Party. And think about that moment in 2015 when AAP came to power in Delhi. Everybody in India was watching as to what is it that this party will now do. The journey so far has been miraculous. But can outsiders, can some completely, non-establishment people come inside a government and actually bring about a meaningful change? Because, the reality is that bulk of Indians and middle class Indians have become cynical of governments and for politicians. That fine, they can do some things, but, large changes are not possible. But over the last 10 years, and I have been part of the, Aam Aadmi Party government for 8 out of these 10 years. I joined them in 2016. I first started out as an advisor to the then Deputy Chief Minister, Mr. Manish Sisodia, who's also the Education Minister and Finance Minister. And in 2018, I was appointed to the policy think tank of Delhi government. It's called DDC, Dialogue and Development Commission of Delhi. I was the vice chairperson reporting into the chairperson, who's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. So for 8 out of these 10 years, I actually saw what is this promise of Aam Aadmi Party translating into. And back in 2015, Aam Aadmi Party said a couple of words which I believe are very powerful. In Hindi, it's called Vyavastha Parivartan. And Vyavastha Parivartan is the idea that the party here is not here to implement a few schemes or programs. They are here to turn or almost reorganize how government functions and delivers for the common man. And the reason was, back in 2015 and even right now in bulk of India, and by the way, I'll be very careful when I say bulk of India because Kerala especially is an outlier. So I'm wading into this debate very carefully. But as far as bulk of India is concerned, people have stopped imagining that government schools can perform better than private schools. They think that possibly governments will never be able to deliver quality and good education in their government schools. Government hospitals or clinics are defunct. Only the poor will go there. Middle classes have to, find their own options. Governments will not be able to provide 24/7 electricity easily, and definitely not free electricity. You're seeing power tariffs rise through the roof. Public transport system, quality public transport systems, water supply reaching each and every household. And, you may think that maybe a state, a well-developed state like Kerala has done well, but even in Delhi, these were not the reality. But in the last 10 years, and the story that I tell in this book is actually documenting how this government that came out of nowhere has gone about systematically transforming all these issues that actually deal with the day-to-day quality of life of an average person. And that is what the hope of the people of Delhi was, because somehow the politics, at least in that part of the country, in North India and in, I would say, bulk of India, had become about ideological debates. Nobody was even talking about the vision for transforming government schools, of offering high-quality, world-class healthcare for free of cost in government institutions, providing 24/7 electricity, helping families deal with inflation. So this is what I document in this book. And in summary, if I have to summarize, the Delhi model of governance is a model which prioritizes investments into human capital. Here's the government that has made its agenda that more than anything, the job of the government is to ensure that we invest in our people, provide them with world-class healthcare, education, high-quality services like water, electricity, transport, even the action on air pollution, because that is what will take the country forward. And at the same time, it has believed in providing a social safety net for the most vulnerable. The idea that, the poor and the middle classes ought to get some relief from the government. And that is why we have schemes in Delhi, which at that time nobody in the country had, and today many states are replicating. the free electricity scheme, the free water scheme, free bus rides for women. So a lot of these schemes have started in Delhi, which are now being adopted. So I talk about it in this book, and I also talk about how Delhi model provides some kind of a roadmap. And I genuinely believe that after 10 years and stepping back, Delhi model is not just about what has been done in Delhi, but some of the principles of what we have done are applicable if we really want to chase the vision of a developed India. This idea that Viksit Bharat, and we talk a lot about that, oh, India should become developed India by 2047. But we are not going to do that by following the path that we are following at the pan-India level. And I argue that Delhi model provides some of the answers as to what we need to be doing even at the national level.
Can I request you something? Can you sit here? And if I could sit there, because I can see the clock then. we have to keep to time. So thank you. So if you can briefly tell us, like, the Delhi model has three pillars. So just tell us very briefly, what are these three pillars?
So the three pillars of Delhi model, and I discussed the first chapter of the book is what really is the Delhi model and the economic foundations of the Delhi model. The first pillar is making India first. Make India first, or which is essentially the idea of, and it was kind of a counter to Make in India, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched, which is saying give a lot of incentives and people will come and invest in India. And Aam Aadmi Party formulated that is not going to be sustainable of just throwing money and incentives to get people to invest. You invest in your people first. If your people and your human capability is as good as what is available in other competing countries in China or East Asia or many else where a lot of investments are going, then people will automatically invest. So the number one pillar is investing in human capital. And how we have done that in Delhi? Delhi is the only state in India that has consistently invested around 40% of its budget in health and education for the last 10 years. Not 1 year or 2 years, but for the last 10 years. And that requires political will and inherent belief that unless and until we are going to invest money, and it's not just about money, it's what did we do with that money, be it infrastructure, sending our teachers abroad. We routinely send our government school teachers and principals abroad for training, to Finland, to Cambridge, to Singapore, really investing and making them believe that they are no less than the best in the world. We have empowered our school management committees. They decide how to run their schools. We give them a budget. They don't need to seek any approval. And we have launched the kind of curricular innovations today, which I don't think any government schooling system in the country has. We have something called a happiness curriculum. Every child from nursery to class 8 goes through a 40-minute happiness class every day in a government school.
Something that Melania Trump, when she came to India,
yes,
saw that, right?
Absolutely. So last time, 2020, when Melania Trump was the first lady then, she came to India and she had heard about this happiness class. And she said, I want to go and see Arvind Kejriwal's happiness class. So she came and she sat, and obviously the international media covered it. The New York Times in their front page talked about Delhi's education model and how it is lifting lakhs and lakhs of children out of poverty.
So what is the second pillar then?
The second pillar is about war on corruption. And this is important because the beginning of Aam Aadmi Party was out of the anti-corruption movement. But, one is fighting corruption. But a war on corruption is important because, and I argue in this book, the reason why many governments, even if they want to improve, let's say, things like health, education, they are not able to, because there are vested interests that are in control of these things. I mean, at least I can say in bulk of North India, the reason why government schools don't get any investments is because it is the politicians who are running all the private schools, and they keep jacking up the prices. So it's a profiteering racket that goes on. Similarly, in hospitals and healthcare, look at all the major hospital chains. They have their own political links. So there is no incentive for governments to invest in them. I talk about the work that we did in laying water pipelines. The water tanker mafia was run by politicians. So unless a government comes with an inherent ethos of fighting corruption, and it's not just about preventing leakages, but even conceptualizing and implementing reforms which will upset many of the vested interests. So it's the war on corruption, which is a result why we were able to implement many of these reforms. The third pillar of the Delhi model is commitment to fiscal prudence. And this argument is often made with Aam Aadmi Party that, oh, you're giving a lot of benefits to the poor, to the middle classes, you're giving a lot of free schemes, freebies, but it will ruin the state finances. And this is where, it is a good question, but in Delhi, we are able to do all this. We are able to give a lot of free transfers to the people because we have managed to increase our government budget by a historic 2.5 times in the last 10 years. In our previous 5 years before the AAP came to power, the budget of Delhi government increased from 25,000 to 30,000 crores. So around 1,000 crores per year. In the last 10 years, our budget has risen from 30,000 to 75,000 crores, an increase of around 5,000 crores per year. So something has happened. We have prevented the leakages in our tax collection system. More importantly, we have found ways to curb the wasteful expenditure in the government. I mean, if somebody tells you that today government has no money to spend in health and education, it's the biggest lie. Because the amount of wasteful expenditure, and I'll give just one example. Before the AAP came to power, to provide primary healthcare, Delhi government used to set these dispensaries. And I talk about it in the book. To provide primary healthcare, which is essentially doctor, nurses, and few lab technicians, 5 crores were spent to set up one dispensary, which is a multi-level concrete structure. Our government replaced this with a Mohalla clinic, which is a small pota cabin structure and air-conditioned clinic, but built at a cost of 20 lakhs. So we are providing the same service. We built more than 550 of these clinics. 20 lakhs versus 5 crore. We brought the cost down to 5%. But it does 5 times better job than that. So that is where the will and the intent to innovate comes in. So we've curbed a lot of wasteful expenditure. We have increased government revenues. And as a result, while we have done these allocations to health education, provided these free schemes, Delhi today is the least indebted state in the entire country.
In fact, you have a surplus, don't you?
We have, for the last 10 years, we have run a budget surplus. First of all, we don't run a deficit, we have a budget surplus. But we have reduced the overall debt. The previous government left Delhi with a total debt to GDP ratio of 7%. And Delhi today is at 4%. All other states and pan-India, you will see the debt to the GDP ratio increasing. In Delhi, we have managed to actually reduce it. And that is the story I tell in this book.
It's just astonishing how the same people who criticize AAP or anybody else, I remember MGR, when he came out with his free midday meal scheme, criticizing for populism, because anything that is given to the poor people to have a basic start in life, that is criticized as populism. But tax cuts to the billionaires, that's not seen as populism. So I just don't understand why we are still arguing about this when example after example after example, we have seen how investing in the human beings builds for a better society, is better for the economy, it's better for family life. And Kerala is actually a role model in this, but we will come back to this. This is not rocket science. What you said, cutting out wasteful expenditure, plugging leakages, all these things are, pretty straightforward. So what really helped to transform Delhi like this?
It is not rocket science, and therefore the question is, why is this not happening in many other states? And what I argue is that it comes down to political will. It comes down to the kind of politicians, and I'm not making the case that only Aam Aadmi Party can do this. There are many, in fact, Tamil Nadu and Kerala has seen successive governments who have made some of these decisions in the past. But somewhere, if you step back and look at India level indicators, I mean, think about it. I mean, we spend so much, the union government, the BJP government spends a lot of time talking about, developed nation, India should become a developed nation. But do you know that in the last 10 years, India has drastically cut down its expenditure in education and health? We were never one of the top spending countries in education and health. By the way, India ranks 180 out of 190 countries in per capita expenditure in healthcare. We are in the worst 10. We are not even talking about being in the top 100. We are in the worst 10 spending in healthcare. We were spending 4% of our budget in education back in 2015. Today, we spend only 2.5%. In healthcare also, we are one of the few countries in the world that has cut down its public healthcare spending after the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's very difficult for me to understand why is it that the governments don't want to do this. And I think the simple answer is vested interests. Governments have found a way, I think, or parties have found a way to literally fool the people, keep them busy in ideological debates. And if you look at, we are right now in the middle of Delhi elections. Look at what are the kind of conversations happening in Delhi elections, or for that matter, most elections in India are not fought on who has a vision for education for the state, who has a vision for providing world-class healthcare, 24/7, cheap electricity, free electricity, providing pension security, providing all these things that people really care about. And how do you avoid that? You create a false narrative. You have a diversionary tactic, and you crucify the people who are actually doing this. So, by the way, the Aam Aadmi Party has paid a heavy price for trying to bring this entire debate on issues like health, education, being able to provide all these free benefits. Because when you start asking, or when AAP goes and campaigns in other states, and we had an interesting time campaigning about these things in Gujarat. AAP fought the Gujarat elections 2 years back in 2022, and we won 5 MLA seats. People there did not believe that electricity is free for 70% of the households in Delhi. For 90% households in Delhi, they either get free or subsidized electricity. Bus rides are free for women. That education, government schools have swimming pools, they have libraries, they have hockey turf stadiums, they have perhaps better infrastructure than private schools. They could not believe it, and they somehow feel all of these are fake narratives. So it's very important for the opposition to deride and literally crucify. And I would say the last 2 years of what we have seen in AAP is an attempt to almost say that these things aren't true, and there's something wrong, and therefore these parties and these kind of conversations should not happen. And the reason to write this book is because I believe mass media does definitely a very poor job of communicating the reality of some of these governance innovations and work that has happened in Delhi. And I hope that this book becomes a starting point for far more informed discussions. And I'm not saying Delhi is the only one that has done it, but if Delhi has done it, and Delhi has done it in 10 years flat, there's no reason other states and voters all over the country should not be asking at least these questions, that when will you do this in our state?
See, you can believe in what he says, or you can read the book carefully, because it is well documented. And it is really astonishing what has been achieved, the transformation to world-class classrooms. More classrooms, better classrooms. All this can be done. And that is why I say, please read the book, because this is like civics textbook. We have to know these things, what is possible. We cannot fight for something that we cannot even imagine, right? So this helps us to really believe in a certain model that is achievable. Now, you have the Delhi model, Kejriwal's Delhi model, and then you have Narendra Modi's Gujarat model. How do you contrast the two?
So, bulk of my book, I think 95%, I did not want to wade into conversations or comparisons, because that's a big thing in itself. So 95% of the book is talking about the Delhi model and how can it provide a vision for a developed India. But the comparison with Gujarat model was important because, BJP sees Aam Aadmi Party as its primary contender, I would say. And in the last 10 years, in fact, Kerala was the first state that came out with the conversation of a model in the 70s, I remember. But at least since 2014, and ever since Chief Minister Modi became Prime Minister Modi, the conversation on Gujarat model at least has dominated the national media. And bulk of the national media still believes, or still tries to communicate, I'm not sure under pressure or what is the reason, it tries to communicate the Gujarat model as something that the entire country should aspire to. And it was important for me to put out a very factual comparison of Delhi versus Gujarat model. So what is the Gujarat model? And I'll take a minute to just summarize. The Gujarat model of development is one where the entire government, the state, has reduced its responsibility to ensuring high economic growth and nothing else. And they do that by throwing lavish incentives at all the big businesses and the big industrialists. Today, you get land literally free of cost in Gujarat, 1 rupee per acre. You get thousands of crores of loans at 1% interest rate and for 20 years. You get huge sales tax relief. So literally, 40-50% of government revenues or sales tax is going into giving relief. And as a result of it, what happens? The government is left with very little money to spend on things that only the government can do, which is providing quality education, healthcare to the middle and the lower classes. As a result, what has happened is, yes, Gujarat has achieved one of the highest growth rates in the country. But when you look at the average wages, this is basically Gujarat is the poster child for something called trickle down economics, which a lot of countries follow, which is give huge relief to the people at the top, make sure that they set up industries, and hopefully some of this money and prosperity will trickle down to the masses. Gujarat is also today the poster child for the failure of trickle down economics, as I write in this book. The average wages in Gujarat today is 270 rupees per day, which is lower than the national average of 350 rupees. Kerala actually has the highest average wages at 700 rupees. Delhi is also close to that. But in terms of minimum wages also, Gujarat today is one of the lowest in the country. It's at around 9,000 rupees per month in minimum wages. Delhi has 18,000 rupees of minimum wages. It is the highest in the country. But when you look at the social indicators, you see the miraculous failure of the Gujarat model. Gujarat ranks second in the country in terms of malnourishment. 40% of children in Gujarat are today malnourished. In terms of money allocated to education and healthcare as part of the budget, Gujarat is one of the lowest in the country. If you look at just the education, 10,000 out of 30,000 government schools of Gujarat operate under tin sheds. They don't even have, a proper pakka building. Teacher vacancies are through the roof. And more than 50% of children in Gujarat do not go to 11th standard. They do not cross 10th standard. And when you look at higher education, it is around 15 to 20%. So the argument I make in this book is that, Gujarat model privileges a lot about economic growth, but this is growth for whom? If this is growth only for the top 10%, then that clearly is not the model for the country to follow. And the reason why Gujarat model I felt ought to be discussed is, along with Mr. Modi, the Gujarat model has also now come to the center. The central government in the last 10 years has followed exactly what Gujarat has been doing for the last 30 years. Education and health budgets, lowest ever in the history of India. The tax cuts and freebies to the corporates, as you talked about, highest in the history of India. In the last 10 years, 15 lakh crores of loans have been written off for the big industrialists, NPAs that have been written off. Biggest corporate tax cuts given in the history of India in 2019. 1 lakh crores wiped out every year from the government's budget. And if you look at inequality, and I write about the work of the economist Thomas Piketty, as of today, India is more unequal than it was under the British rule. We are seeing heavy concentration of wealth amongst the top 10%. In the last 10 years, the average wages of an average Indian have stagnated. So the country is becoming larger economy. We are the 5th largest economy, but the per capita income in India has been stagnant for the last 20 years. So this is this lopsided Gujarat model that I talk about.
It's, just as you're proud of the Delhi model, and rightly so, we in Kerala, of course, we are proud of our Kerala model, because we actually started thinking about this and getting down to doing it from the 1960s. And one key aspect, which was the teacher to the whole world, and I'm talking about development experts from World Bank, from the United States, from Japan, the one thing that Kerala taught, the Kerala model taught, was the empowerment of women, the education of women. And once women are educated, you will see many things happening in the health and education sphere. So you have zero population growth, for instance, in Kerala, the only state, in India to have that. So this Kerala model also grew out of our egalitarian ethos. Again, I think Kerala is the only egalitarian state in the country. So this has been a great model of success, but of course there have been distortions. It's a model that has been around for 50, 60 years. There are needs for change and improvement, but Kerala teaches a lot how it was done way back in the 60s. I partly live in Norway now, and Norway is one of the richest countries in the world. They also have the same, I wouldn't say the ARP model, because the ARP model came later, but it is about investing in your people, because that is a nation's greatest wealth. You cannot achieve wealth, you can achieve only inequality, any other model. And this I think the danger that we are seeing now in the world with concentration of wealth in the rich, I think the danger is really that we are going to enter a period of instability, of destabilization. Because, I once wrote something which later Amartya Sen won the Nobel Prize for. Nobody will believe that I wrote it first, but I wrote it as a journalist. And I said that inequality is harder to bear than poverty. This is what the poor people were telling me. So now, when the poor people see the kind of inequality, they're not going to stand back and stay quiet. So you have the Kerala model, you have the Tamil Nadu model, as you rightly said. But I just want to take a little break from the two of us and ask some of our audience to just one or two things that you can talk about the Kerala model, which you could give as advice or suggestion to Jasmine, because he's also here on his book tour. As much as he's talking about this, there is also need for all of us to learn and share experiences. Is there somebody who can say something nice or a critic of the Kerala model? You're all, yes, please. Sorry. Yeah.
I think Kerala has one of the best decentralized system of governance. I think that's something that anybody should take away. I think that's definitely one of the best. Wow.
Thank you. It's really decentralization. Panchayati Raj,
Yeah, absolutely.
as it was, yeah.
We'll just take one or two more.
Yeah, any other questions? Yes, please, yeah.
Question is related to Kerala model, or it is open anything?
You can ask about anything, but I mean, I'm going to have another session of questions later, which will be about everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then later on, I will have the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to ask us, state a simple fact about Aam Aadmi Party after reading the Delhi model book. Am I allowed to say that, or do I only speak on Kerala model?
No, it doesn't matter. Now you speak. It's okay.
One of the things which we face in the public, and especially in Kerala, is in Malayalam we call it "Ningalku Rashtriyam Ariyilla." So often the counter question to me,
That means you don't know politics.
that you do not know you do not know politics, and Aam Aadmi Party does not know politics. And probably just 2 days before, Arvind Kejriwal very openly admitted he does not know politics. He's more of an engineer who's there to work for this country. My question is, what is politics? To the person I interact with, what exactly is politics to you? And I found the answer in Jasmine Shah's book, which says, Kaam ki Rajniti. Politics should be about work. Politics should be about issues of the country. Aam Aadmi Party has been very successful on bringing issues on the table and not the politics which people are now confusing, which to me is treachery, cheating, and many other names you can give it. To me, they have been able to change that facet of Rashtriyam or politics.
So, I completely agree. I mean, repeatedly AAP has been asked, what is your political ideology? And people are never satisfied when we say it's Kaam ki Rajniti, it's politics of work. And they said, but how can that be a political ideology? And we said, but what do you care about? Are you looking for a philosophy teacher in your politician? Or do you want your politician to actually address the issues that will take the country forward? I mean, it is by, like you said, Norway or no country has become developed without having a world-class education and healthcare system. But somehow the politicians in our country have all the time to talk about everything else except health and education. They have all the time to talk about everything else except for how will they really address issues like corruption, fiscal prudence, how will they increase revenues, all of these things. So somewhere it is simplistic, but it is also true, and this is who we are. And I just want to very quick response on the completely the decentralized model of governance. Not very much applicable because Delhi is a small city state and the Panchayati Raj structure is not there. But we would have really wanted, we had come up with the idea of Mohalla Sabhas, which is relevant even in the urban areas. And that, we started putting a bill together, we started moving the proposal. But in Delhi, the Legislative Assembly, every proposal of the Legislative Assembly has to be approved by the center. And there's one of the last chapters in my book is about this entire Delhi government and central government tussle. And one of the ideas that has gotten sort of, I would say, delayed, and I hope at some day it will become true. Because while we do have a very successful rural model of Panchayati Raj and decentralized governance, I believe our urban model of Mohalla Sabhas and urban model of how an average citizen can participate in day-to-day decision making is yet to see the light of the day. And I hope Aam Aadmi Party will be the first one to do this.
I think when, to Sabina's question, I think, it is as simple as Vyavastha Vatavaran, the transformation of your, environment, your habitat. That's what we are all suffering from, all these various issues. And and the difference between politics and politicking, we have actually ruined the word politics. There's nothing wrong with politics, but it is not politics. They are doing politicking, which is intrigue, how to topple that one, how to bring in your crony, so on and so forth. That's not, that is about their own activities, which are really bad. What is it doing for the people? So that's, I think, and I don't think we should ever be defensive of what we are doing. They should be defensive. We are doing, and there is the clear messages there in Delhi. If you go to Delhi, you will believe it yourself. Next time, in fact, you should have these campaigns to get activists to Delhi to see, because they have to see it. I'll give you a small example. Let me just give a small example. When, in 2014, it was Kejriwal contesting against Narendra Modi in Varanasi. So I, as a journalist, wanted to go there. I had just contested for AAP in Cochin, but I wanted to see this, clash of the two giants. I went over there. It was incredible, the kind of money that Narendra Modi was spending, but it was not like AAP was a small sideshow. It was also very powerful. I started asking all the people who were there at the AAP, road shows, and every one of them said how they knew what had happened in Delhi. And this was just about a year or so after after AAP was in governance. So I said, how do you know? You see, Delhi is full of migrants. The migrants go back, and they are from Uttar Pradesh and, other places. They go back and they tell their people, imagine what is happening. You can't believe it. Come to Delhi to see this. And all of them, that is why, even though he lost, he got a huge amount of votes, Kejriwal. So unless you see it, you cannot believe. We've all been lulled into this thing that, we have to live with this shoddy buildings and terrible pothole roads. We've come to accept that. And this will show that, no, we don't have to accept this, and we don't have to go to Norway or Switzerland to see these things. We can see it in Delhi, if only some people would allow you to see, and if you have the interest to see it. And I think if all the activists could be brought to Delhi to see this.
So this is one thing that today we say confidently to all of you who are there in audience. If you're ever in Delhi, or whenever you're next in Delhi, please do take a couple of hours out and go to any of the Delhi government schools, okay, the state government schools, or go into any of our Mohalla clinics. We talk a lot about, there's a chapter in this book about what has Mohalla clinic done to the entire healthcare system. And by the way, in the last 10 years, there are at least 10 states who have tried replicating the example of Mohalla clinic, but Delhi still has the most efficiently run system. No government will say that. I would say in most of these North Indian states, no government will say, go and visit our government schools and clinics. Almost it's like a, as a tourist, I'm inviting you, because we know that there is real work done. Go and speak to the teachers. And I say that, because I am also an Aam Aadmi Party politician. This question is asked that how much of this is truth? And apart from the 50 pages of citations, I say that, if you feel that there is something is wrong in this, go and visit Delhi, speak to the teachers, principals, go speak to the doctors and the patients, and ask them, in the last 10 years, have your lives changed? and you will get the answer. In contrast, and I must tell you that since Aam Aadmi Party was campaigning in Gujarat and in Uttar Pradesh, the first things our politicians, our Aam Aadmi Party politicians would do if we go to campaign in other state, the first day we would land from the airport and go to the government school. This has become our modus operandi. And it has now become the modus operandi of BJP to make sure that the police blocks the road of our politicians from entering government schools. I mean, this is what it has become, that opposition politicians are not allowed to visit government schools in BJP ruled states. And that just shows the reality that, and I talk about one incident that we still succeeded in 2022 to make the Gujarat elections about education. And Prime Minister Modi felt that he should also talk about some education. So he went and launched some big scheme in Gujarat, but he chose not to go into any of the existing Gujarat government schools. They actually set up a small studio and a tent with 4 benches and children. And when the media learned about it, it became viral that after 30 years, they couldn't find a single government school where the Prime Minister could go and sit and click a photo.
So the thing is, yes, I mean, I think most of us are convinced that AAP is doing a great job in Delhi. But the price that AAP is paying, AAP people are paying, is so high. You have these investigations, you have arrests, and you have, Kejriwal is arrested just before the elections. To any ordinary person who wants to do good but live a peaceful life, it seems to be too high a price. So how do you cope with this level of harassment?
So, I like the answer Manish Sisodia had given this. He had come, Mr. Manish Sisodia was sent into jail for 17 months. And this entire so-called Delhi excise scam was a completely fake case. In fact, I have written about what the Delhi excise policy was, how it was set to double the government revenues due to excise because it prevented leakages into the system. But, it came under BJP, used that as a political tool to attack. So for 17 months, Manish Sisodia was into jail. And once he came out and he was asked this question, what do you think about, did you make the right choice coming into politics? And he said that, when we came into politics, we never thought that we would rule or we would come to power. And I would become the Deputy Chief Minister and Education Minister. And through my work, I would impact the lives of 18 lakh children in Delhi. So politics gives you sometimes a crown to wear on your head. And if you're willing to wear the crown, you need to be ready to pay the price of the kind of muck that is thrown at you. And if you cannot have that spine to stand up at these times, and somewhere that faith was there, that we have faith in our judiciary, however slow it is, that if the truth is on your side, what will they do? For 5, 10, literally we felt that maybe for 5, 6 months is the maximum that they can put you in jail, and after that there would be bail. But they had amended the law. The Prevention of Money Laundering Act was amended only 2 or 3 years before the Delhi excise case was concocted. And they used that amended law to put all our leaders in jail. For the first time, a national political party's top 4 leaders were put in jail. But because the truth was on our side, we knew that aaj nahi to kal, today or tomorrow, we are going to come out. And I must say that, it comes from the leadership. It was Manish Sisodia who stood up. It was Arvind Kejriwal, Satyendra Jain, our health minister and the brain behind many of our healthcare reforms, mohalla clinics and many things. He was in jail for more than 2 years. And I think part of it is that it is through moments like this that the ethos of the party is also built. I mean, we are very much a party that is learning, trying to adapt to what Indian politics is. As ma'am here said, we're still trying to learn what Indian politics is. And the last 2 years have literally hardened many of us that if this is all that they can go to, then we are ready for it. And if our top leaders are willing to bear the price, I mean, the rest of us, it's only inspiring that after doing all this work, the price you pay is to be put behind bars. So I think you have to just stand up to bully.
It's. I want to talk just briefly about Delhi, not the Delhi model.
Sorry, I just want to also say that on that note, a documentary has been released just 3 or 4 days back on Dhruv Rathi's channel. How many of you know about it? So it's called Unbreakable. Go to YouTube, search Unbreakable. It's a 30-minute beautiful film made on the last 2 years of what was this entire conspiracy, and how did AAP come out of it. It beautifully narrated. A lot of AAP leaders are also there in it. Many journalists are in it. You will see it on Dhruv Rathi's channel.
So, Delhi, there was a time when you went from Delhi to any other part of the world and people would say, oh, you're from Delhi, how interesting, and so on and so forth. Now, when you say you're from Delhi, they say, it's so polluted. Why is it so polluted? Why is it so polluted?
So, incidentally, Anita, the first chapter I wrote on this book was pollution. And that's also because I was one of the key people working on the entire environmental sector reforms in Delhi government. There are a few things to understand. First of all, I tell people it is not Delhi's pollution, it is North India's pollution. 10 years back, around 30 out of 50 most polluted cities in the world were in India 10 years back. Today, that number is 42. 42 out of 50 most polluted cities in India, in the world, are in India, and almost all of them are in North India. And the reason, many factors, but somewhere as a country, any country which had a pollution problem of that scale would have been into a war mode, would have been in a mission mode to do something about it. And I argue in this book that, and a lot of studies shown to first understand what is the nature of Delhi's pollution, how much of it is coming from Delhi and outside Delhi. There are studies from professors at IIT Delhi, IIT Kanpur I cite in this book, which say that only 30% of the pollution of the air that we breathe in Delhi comes from sources within Delhi. The remaining 70% comes from surrounding states. So if let's say today's Delhi's AQI is 400, and if you shut down Delhi, let's say you impose a lockdown on Delhi, how much will you reduce Delhi's pollution? It'll come to 300. It'll still be one of the most polluted cities in the country. And cities around the world have shown that the recipe to tackle pollution is at the regional level. Beijing has done this, Mexico has done this. You come and you talk about all the 4 states. Delhi has a larger area called Delhi NCR. And there are 4 states that are part of Delhi NCR. Repeatedly, the AAP government in Delhi has been telling the national government that Prime Minister should have a commission or a committee headed by the Prime Minister. All the surrounding state chief ministers who have this pollution problem should sit on it and agree on a minimum binding action plan. Make sure that whatever action Delhi is taking, all the states should be doing, but not a single meeting. In the last 10 years, the Prime Minister has not addressed the issue of pollution, not for even 1 year, but that doesn't mean, and I'm going to summarize the work that AAP has done, because in the last 10 years, if there is any government that has acted on air pollution, it is the AAP government. And as a result of that, despite the larger perception that pollution in Delhi is increasing or still very huge, it is concerning. But in the last 10 years, and I cite Central Pollution Control Board data, in the last 10 years, Delhi's average PM 2.5 levels have decreased by 45%. How have they decreased? Because we have taken some concrete actions that no other state in India has done. A, we have shut down all our thermal power plants. B, we offer 24/7 electricity. There are no diesel generators that you will see anywhere in Delhi. Immediately outside Delhi, Noida, Gurgaon, you see some of the most posh colonies running in 24/7 diesel generators. We have moved all of Delhi's polluting industries from coal to piped natural gas. We have doubled the length of Delhi Metro. Delhi has today the longest metro network in the country. More than that, Delhi is the leader in electric vehicles. Today, 12% of all newly registered vehicles in Delhi are EVs. We have close to 2,000 electric buses, which is not just the highest in India, it is the third highest in the world after China and Chile.
But
So all these actions have been taken.
Is crop burning part of the big, larger problem?
So the problem now in Delhi is that if you look at January to December, I would say between Jan and October, you see a clear difference. And that is how the number of good days, as I said, in the last 10 years, the pollution has reduced by 45%. So our national government has AQI, Air Quality Index. And as per that, the quality is rated as good, moderate, bad. Number of good days in Delhi have increased from around 105 to 200 in the last 10 years. But bulk of them are from Jan to October. Especially the months of November and December are very polluted. And part of the reason is the crop stubble burning, but it's also geographical factors like wind speed, temperature inversion. On crop stubble burning, we used to say a lot about Punjab and Haryana, and ever since the AAP government has come in Punjab, and I present the data for the last 5 years, the instances of crop stubble burning in just 2 years in Punjab have reduced from 70,000 to 35,000. It needs to further reduce to maybe less than 5,000. So at least there is now progress that is visible. Unfortunately, this year, while we have seen further decrease in crop instances in Punjab, we have seen instances increase in Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, and Rajasthan. And again, this brings me back to the point that we seem to be only it's like the elephant. You hold the tail, you hold the leg, but until you bring all the actors together and say that everybody needs to do a common set of things, you are not going to do this. And somehow that political will, and it brings me back that somehow governance at the pan-India level seems to be completely devoid of issues that matter to the public.
So there is a simpler way you can try to win Haryana and Uttar Pradesh.
Okay, ma'am.
That is not a question.
That is next on our target.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so you are talking about the Delhi model, and somehow you have mentioned happy curriculum. You have introduced, your government has introduced a happy curriculum. See, as far as happy curriculum is concerned, I am a teacher educator. Educator. In my opinion, that is not a big deal. That is not a big deal because not a big deal. Country like Sweden and Norway, continuously they are topping the rank. Continuously, first, second. They don't have any such provision of happy curriculum. You have introduced, it's okay. Even in this state where I'm standing right now, I'm from North India, I'm standing. Even they don't have provision of happy curriculum. But I'm, in my understanding, in my knowledge and observation, this is the one of the best state when it comes to government school and its provision and functioning. I'm talking about this. I'm coming to that it is very much touted that you have improved the quality of education. Would you like to tell me how many schools, how many new schools, specifically how many new schools you have created, how many new universities and new colleges you have created in Delhi? I'm coming. Let me. Then further,
For that, I would suggest that you read his book for the first part. He explains it in detail. You will remember. But please ask your second question. We are running short. We have only 5 minutes left.
I would like to know something about the number of hospitals you have made up in Delhi and little something about your political ideology and journey. I'm sorry, ma'am, please. So, the moment you have started this campaign, your boss, Arvind Kejriwal, I was ardent fan of him. I was supporter of him. He made it very clear. Nobody in the party will have two highest position. Like the moment I am convener of the party, I will not be the chief minister of the party.
No.
Sir, I will.
He's not said that.
I will show you on record. Please.
Okay, what is your question?
My question is this: how you have compromised with your ideology? You are having success. You are having this time. You are talking about the Delhi model, but same time you compromised with your ideology. And this point, I mean, where he has many tall leaders like Yogendra Yadav, Prashant Bhushan, Professor Anand. Everyone has deserted the party.
Okay,
and
why has compromised his ideology?
yes,
That's your
and
question.
then Delhi
Okay.
model, number
That's-
of
he'll
schools,
take that.
hospitals, and all.
So four questions. I'll do a very quick job. Please sit. So happiness curriculum. See, the reason why other parts of the world have not done it is not a reason why Delhi should not be doing something new. The happiness curriculum, and there's a philosophy. See, what is the job? I think it goes back to the question of what should be the goal of an education system. As AAP, we have articulated our vision for an education system as twofold. First, to build, people, well-educated citizens who are employable, who can drive the economy forward. But second is to build human values. You need better citizens for the society. Happiness curriculum has a lot of mindfulness training, a lot of other kind of, I would say, learning interventions that allow people to connect with human values, and lot of examples of children benefiting, and especially the background, the socio-economic background that government school students come from. They see the value for happiness. It allows them to de-stress. and allows them to open up, a lot of these hidden stresses and mental health issues. And that is where the happiness curriculum comes in. You'll read more about it in the book. In terms of how many schools, infrastructure,
That is there in the, that is there in
very,
the book.
very short, I will just respond. Hospitals, I'll skip because there's a lot written in it. Delhi had 24,000 government school classrooms in 2015. It took 65 years to build 24,000 government school classrooms. In the last 10 years, we have added 22,000 classrooms to the government school system. That is the scale of transformation. And as in comparison to all government school systems, which are seeing reduced enrollment, for the first time in Delhi, we are seeing in the last 10 years, in 9 years, we have seen more than 2 lakh children drop out of private schools to join government schools. So that is some reality. Now, this digression of Aam Aadmi Party from values, we were very clear
30 seconds.
that AAP came here because it wanted to serve the people. Delhi model, in some sense, is a record for the promise of AAP turned into delivery or not. We have never promised that a position holder in AAP will not hold a position in the government. You can come and check it, but that is not true at all. Why did some people leave AAP? See, there are individual differences. When political parties grow, people will leave, people will join. I am an example of a person who was outside AAP and who's joined AAP. There are many others who have. So that is at the party level. But eventually, a political party needs to be judged by the work it has done for its people.
We are running out of time. We've just got 1 minute. We have to wrap up as well. Please, we take the last question.
Where does the AAP stand on the responsibility of a government with regards to culture? The preservation of heritage, freedom of expression, artistic expression, political expression, all of those things. Because while you are very good at the Roti, Kapda, Makan, School, Hospital, I have very little actual knowledge of where you stand as a government on culture and the state's role in it.
How come you overlook the Aurat from this patriarchal nomenclature? It's again Aam Aadmi Party. How come you ignored the Aurat?
Aurat.
Yeah.
So it is, I think, more of to do with the common language that is used in North India. You can pardon our the fact that we were born in North India and this is a language that gets communicated. But sincere apologies. I had
Yeah.
no role to play in it.
Yeah,
but
it's true. It's like common man, but now you
Common
don't
man.
say that in English.
And
We don't say that.
Very quick answer to
yeah.
Miriam's question. So AAP has tried to do, and I must admit that the potential of what ought to have been done on culture, a very small fraction of it is done. The will is very much there. I'll tell you 1 or 2 examples of stuff that we did. We had a program, most of the time government-funded art festivals or events would happen in Lutyens, Delhi, in the heart of Delhi. We initiated a program where for the first time these artists would do in peripheral Delhi to bring art to where the real Delhi lives, not the 3%, but the 97%. We also came out with a very forward-looking film policy. I believe it's a very progressive film policy. And we also started working on a larger cultural policy for Delhi. I don't think we've finished that project yet. But a lot of things yet to be done in Delhi model. And I can at least promise you, once we come back to power, culture will be one of our core priorities in the coming period as well.
Thank you so much. I just want to end on one comment, which is on crony capitalism, and you have 15 seconds to answer this. The reason I am so worried about this is what we have just seen now in the United States with Donald Trump and Musk. This kind of marriage between power and profit has happened in India, is happening in India and on different parts of the world. But when it happens in the United States, it takes crony capitalism to a high degree of legitimacy. And that is very destructive for societies. Because AAP has fought so much on against corruption, how can this crony capitalism between the power and the profit, between the politician and the billionaire, trillionaire, how can we stop their harmful effects on society?
Well, you can only stop by promoting a kind of politics that works for the people. If you have the kind of politics that works for the top 10%, crony capitalism is nothing but a immediate byproduct. And if political power is drawn from the masses, then politicians would not need to rely on these huge expenditures and distribution of money. That is the basis for crony capital.
I think that is a very good advice for all of us to work for the common masses, common masses, not man. So thank you all for being here with us today. I hope you enjoyed his Delhi model, and come back again to
Thank
Kerala.
you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much,
much.
everyone. Thank you, Anita.